Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing where we got cut off last week, which is the inner world of redemption. And what we were talking about was the reality that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was placed in Or HaGanuz in reality. And that Or HaGanuz that was present at the beginning of creation, in spite of the fact that it was taken away, and in spite of the fact that there was a concealment of it, so that there could be some element of Bechira where we have to try and find our way out of Gullus into Geula, as opposed to always living with the awareness of Geula that is always present. And the departure of this Or Haganuz is not a full departure, but rather what remains is a hint, a trace, an irreducible trace that remains within the recesses of the mind, in that hidden place of the connection between the mind and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light that is being expressed into the mind. We discussed how, according to the Leshem, that place that the Or Haganuz is revealed is the barrier between the Gulgalta and the Moichas Tima'a. The Moichas Tima'a is that place of Chachma, is that place of human graspability, is that place of human understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. And the place of the Golgalta, which is above and beyond human graspability, is the place of the expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. The Golgalta is expression of the Avira Dachia, that purified air that comes about from above to below, that infinite light that is perpetually flowing downwards through the aspect of the Meimei Ein Sof, the infinite watery expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinitude. That represents the Golgalta. And the Moichas Tima'a represents our capacity to grasp and to create vessels in order to encounter that place. And the Leshem spends a lot of time explaining that even though the connection between the Avira and the Butzina, the connection between the Golgalta and the Moichas Tima'a, the expression from above to below and the reception from below to above, have never been fully unified, even at the beginning of creation, because there was always a partition, a kruma da Avira, a partition that separated the expression of the Golgalta, which is the Avira Dachia, the purified air of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light and expression from above to below, and our Moichas Tima'a, the Chochmas Tima'a, that has the capacity of grasping HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression and infinite light from below to above. There was never an immediate unity between the two of them. There's always a partition. And yes, that partition, that Kruma de Avira, stands at the ready to be revealed retroactively later on at the end of creation and the end of existence, to have always been part and parcel of the Avira Dachia itself, which means to say that the partition that we felt was blocking us from the expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light into our graspability and the impossibility of full grasp because of that partition, we're going to see that the partition itself, that momentary lag between HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression and our receptivity, is in fact very part and parcel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression. That's the makom of the tzimtzum, that's the makom of the shetach, of that space and that perimeter where human encounter will never fully grasp the immediacy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression. But that hidden light, that Or HaGanuz, that Yud from the Avira, which was Bokeya, that descended down through the Kruma da Avira, from that partition in our minds, which blocks out our full capacity of experiencing the Or HaGanuz, it goes down into the Moichas Tima itself, and it rests there in the aspect of our graspability. So what we have access to is a trace of that infinite light that was present on the first day of creation in a quintessential form, which enable the individual to see to live with a geula orientation, to live as if everything was fully revealed. And because it was removed, and because it was not fully expressed, and the only way that it was expressed was by way of breaking through the partition, the residual light of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is only accessible by way of a distance. It's hidden within the Torah. It's hidden within the unfolding expression of the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov and the Torah of Rabbi Nachman and all of the Torah of the living tzaddikim ad vias goyel. And so we got caught off when we began to talk about what Rabbi Nachman was describing, that the accessibility to this Or Haganuz, which is that place of the Vitebsker's room in our mind, that place where the Avira Dachia, where the Chachma, the Yud Chachma Kaduma, is fully fundamentally present, where it's Mayim b'Mayim, in that place of Tiveria, in that place of the mind where Mashiach Tzidkenu comes from, by the Kinneret itself, by the music that comes from the unity of the water itself, in that place, in the room of the Vitebsker's mind, the Pri Haaretz, the purpose of what it means to come into Malchus, into Eretz Yisrael, is to taste of that experience of the Vitebsker's study, where the Avir Dachia, the Or Haganuz, is already present, and a person can live in a perspective of Geula Shlema. But the Moichas Tima'a reminds us that it's still not here on the outside. Mashiach is still not here on the outside. But what we're trying to do is uncover that hidden space of redemption, of Karve El Nafshi Giyala, that exists at every moment, available for me to experience. And it's through experiencing that momentary inner, personal, subjective redemption that in truth brings me into contact with the next step of preparing for the full and collective redemption, that the tikkun haprat, that the rectification of the self through the mitzvos maisios of how we connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu are ultimately what bring about the full geula shlema, which stands outside of the realm of human graspability or knowledge, and the secret of lalibi galiti. To my heart I've expressed it, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a hidden thing. The true redemption can be understood, the Gross says. If a person looks at the Sheshis and Mebereshis and applies it to the Elef HaShishi, a person can theoretically come to intuit the day of Mashiach's actual arrival in whatever sense that means something. But the Gra makes a promise out of the reader where he says, but I demand of you to promise that you will not come and reveal this secret, meaning to say that the very secret of redemption is the impossibility of revealing the secret of redemption, because it has to come from a place beyond the possibility of grasp, even by way of a secret. And that's the Mashiach Tzidkenu, that's mamish, that's going to come once we're mezachich, the moichas tima'a, and we reveal that through our own process of thinking and orienting ourselves, we've experienced our geula right here, right now, in the room of the Vitebsker, in our own mind. Then we become kelim ru'uyim to be makabel, the light of Mashiach Tzidkenu mamish, because the light of Mashiach Tzidkenu mamish is going to be the light that comes to reveal that amich kulam sadikim, that I am deserving of Mashiach, in spite of the fact that I'm undeserving. That recognition of undeservedness is the very kli necessary to reveal the inherent deservedness of vias goyel tzedek b'mhera b'yameinu. As the Vilna Gaon points out, Chazal tell us that Mashiach is going to come in a generation that's either completely guilty or completely warranted, either good or bad, completely meritorious or completely guilty as a result of their actions. And what the Gra says, and Leshem brings this down as well, la halacha, he says that, and it's going to be by way of Dor Shakulo Zakai, that ultimately at the end of the day, like the Rambam says, there's going to be a hisoirus of tshuva that's megalazain on the fact that we're deserving, and it's specifically through that undeservedness and that recognition that there's nothing that I can possibly do to be deserving of actual redemption, which brings about actual redemption itself. And that takes place through the process of zichuch and refining our own graspability and allowing the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to ever so slightly express itself further and further until we come to undo the kruma da avira, the separation and the partition valve that separates the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression through the avira dachya and the moichas tima, which is our capacity to grasp it. And Rabbi Nachman says that the Or HaGanuz is hidden in that place. The Or HaGanuz is hidden at the very edge, at the Kruma Da'avir, in that place where the Moichas Tima and the Golgalta are engaged in that perpetual process of which is more significant. The Moichas Tima, which is the light of Torah, which is the light of our graspability and what we can understand in this world, that seems on the one hand to be more important than the Golgalta, which represents the light that comes from above, only from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the secret of Schar Mitzvah, that in the end of the day, there's a Choy, Knasan, V'lo Ya'avor, and the Iker is to do a Mitzvah's Maisios. That's the Golgalta. And the Moichas Tima is the Torah. So we have a stira. One time we see the Torah is higher than the mitzvah, another time we see the mitzvah is higher than the Torah. And this process and dance and emergence of the delicate balance between the Moichas Tima'a, which is our capacity to grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our limited way, and the Golgalta, which is the impossibility of grasping HaKadosh Baruch Hu in an actual way, ultimately the unity between the two of those is going to be where the Or HaGanuz rests. And that place, says Rabbi Nachman, continues to exist within the mind. It continues to exist in that hidden place within the mind, which is the secret of coming to see your world in your days, tasting redemption within your own mind as it stands right now, in spite of the fact that redemption externally has not yet been revealed, because a person is coming to reveal the Or HaGanuz that is always still there, begeder aroishim, an irreducible trace of the quintessential light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinitude, which obviously ha'toifes chelik min ha'etzem, toifes is ha'etzem kulo, as the Baal Shem Tov brings down from the Rambam, that ultimately when it comes to infinitude, if it breaks down into parts, when one grasps a part of infinitude, they are experiencing a grasp of the entirety of infinitude, meaning to say that no matter how minimal that light that remains is, that infinite expression of the Or HaGanuz in our minds, no matter how minimal it is, the most minimal minimalization imaginable, the most particularized particular that can possibly be particularized in the language of the Leshem, Haprat, Hayotem, Mefurot, Sheyachol Aparit, it's specifically there that we uncover that no matter how small, it's still a Tamsit Sadvarm. It's still the quintessence of something, because infinitude expresses itself in everything. Ki hakol hu bakol. And therefore, it gives us hope that by accessing the redemption within our own hearts, in spite of the fact that it's still caught up with the Moichas Tima, nevertheless, it has the ability to bring about the true redemption, which is the Hisnoitzitzitz of the Reshad Loas Yada that comes about through the Yichud of the Moichas Tima and the Golgalta, which is the Das of Mashiach, that comes about from the recognition of our impossibility of bringing redemption, which transforms the ability of redemption to emerge to be what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to bring about. And that's going to be the secret of the Radla. And Rabbi Nachman says this is why Chazal tell us that la'asid lavo in the future tzadikim yoishvin v'itreiseihem biroishayim, and their crowns are going to be within their heads. And Rabbi Nachman points out, why are the crowns going to be in the head? If we generally look at the nature of a crown, a keser is from the language of koteres. It means something that's saviv and makif and surrounding, and not necessarily brought down into the internal experience of the individual's life. But over here, Rabbi Nachman says, Adarabba, Ibcha Mistaber, this is the very point that Itreiseihem, the Or Haganus, the Keser, that is going to be revealed, will always have already been found within the mind of the individual, and it was an unfolding process of Zichuch that was being Megala, that the Or Haganus was exactly where we needed it to be at each and every moment, that the treasure was always in our own house, and that as the Magid walked into the base medrash and said, Atzilus is that Atzilus is here right now, that Mashiach Tzidkenu is here right now in our minds, and now it's a process of coming to terms with being mezachachet on an external level. Now, again, like we said, and we're going to go a little bit slower now, I'll take a breath. But when it comes to understanding the sugyos of Geula, no matter how teeth they are, no matter how deep they are, no matter how externalized they are, we always have to be looking at it through the split screen of human experience and the collective, universal, historic, spiritual unfolding of the Noira Alila and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs history. We have very, very little access to how HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs anything. The Noira Alila, the Hanhagas HaYichud, the fact that everything is perpetually emerging towards that tachlis of all tachlis, which is the hiskalus of Kvod Hashem, Kvod Malchus, in that place of Vias Koyel Tzedek, in that place of Hiskalus of Mashiach, we really have no access there, and ultimately anything that we engage in is really revealed very quickly to be the wooden sword of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, of Shalafta Neged Sererecha, that we play with those weapons that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us to feel that we have some accessibility to the real process in Mashiach unfolding, when ultimately we're forced to come to terms with the fact that Hashem is going to be Megala, that Hashem is going to be Megala, that Hanhagas HaYichud. But when it comes to Hanhagas HaMishpat, when it comes to the process of encountering the light of Mashiach within my own mind, that's where I'm going to have a bechira. That's where I'm going to be engaged in the work. And it's specifically there that a person has to begin to feel the benefits of geula, which are being okay and feeling that all is right and kiel shakai, and that there's enough in this moment, and that it's a nekuda of Shabbos, and there's a nekuda of chidush, or there's a nekuda of connectivity, or there's a birur of something, there's a breakthrough, there's a moving around some issue, there's a lechatchila aribur, there's a smile, there's a point of connectivity, there's hamshachas hashalom, there's feeling good about myself, there's uncovering a nekuda tova, there's pushing myself ever so slightly beyond my limit. All of those elements are kairva el nafshigi Allah. Those are moments of redemption that are perpetually unfolding within a person's life at every moment. And every halacha that we say about redemption, b'klaliyut, in terms of the general redemption of Hanhagas HaYichud, which we have no access to, as what apply to the process of the inner redemption, which is the Hanhaga HaPrati. So everything that we're going to see in the general realm of actual redemption is going to be reflected within the redemption of the self itself. And we have a very interesting, perhaps one of the most significant elements of the concept of Mashiach Tzidkenu and the paradox of his arrival, and the paradox of its arrival, is the pasuk in Yeshaya, and Yeshaya is saturated with words of Geula, saturated with words of Geula, that light of Yesias Mitzrayim, that light of the Geula Shlema, of the Az Yashir, where everything is spoken on Ruach HaKodesh, which means that it could be applied to the historical scene as well as the individual scene. Pasuk says as follows: Hakatan yeh la'elef v'hatziir l'goy atzum, ani Hashem be'ita Achishana. That the small will be 1,000 and the young will be a great nation, and I am Hashem be'ita Achishana. I will hasten it in its time. Be'ita Achishana, I will hasten it in its time. Be'ita Achishana. Be'ita means in its time. Achishana means I will hasten it. And these are two phrases that are clearly coming to describe a process and the emergence of redemption, represented too in the two stages at the beginning of the pasuk, which is that the katan, the small, will be like an elef, will be like 1,000, and the young will be great, meaning there's a transition from smallness to greatness on two levels, on a quantitative level as well as on a qualitative level. There's the one that's going to go all the way up to 1,000, and there's going to be the small that's going to go all the way up to a great nation. And in that place, we're going to reveal the light of Geula and the secret of Be'ita Achishena. I will hasten it in its time. Be'ita in its time. Achishena, I will hasten it. Now, Chazal, on Daf Tzadiches and Maseches Sanhedrin, the tzachus, the clarity of Sanhedrin in Parak Chelek, which is talking mamish about all of these sodos, because a person has to bring about redemption in their mind, and they have to judge themselves in their mind perpetually towards l'toiva. Every positive judgment of the self is an inyan of Vias HaMashiach, is the secret of Chelek Hashem Amo, that Hasamech Bechelko. When I come to be happy with my chelek, both in ruchnius and in gashmius, and I come to realize that ha'teifes chelek min ha'etzem teifes etza etzem kulo, and ezehu ashir hasamech bechelko, and chelek eloi kaimimal mamish, and yesh lahem chelek lo'ilam haba, the element of a chelek, the element of that partial grasp of something, and the recognition that that partial grasp of something is in truth all that I could possibly need in order to taste the real thing. That's the secret of redemption, and that's why it's found in Sanhedrin, because Sanhedrin is the place of judgment. Sanhedrin is the place of Gevura, and yes, Geula comes about by way of Gevura, as we know that it's going to emerge through the light of Yitzchak Avinu, and we're going to say Ki'ata Avinu, because it's specifically from the descent down into the innermost parts of self to uncover the hidden points of light that are remaining there. That act of Gevura, it's a digging down to search for the Beis HaMikdash. It's the light of David Malka Mashiach, which is the light of Malchus, that's caught up in the Choshech HaKaful Mechupel and the Hastar Shebetoich Hastara and the Betan HaNachash, but the Nachash is going to be Masapech to Mashiach. And it's specifically through the Kalim of Gevura, as Leshem explains, because it's ultimately going back closer to the Tzimtzum, to undo the Tzimtzum by understanding the Tzimtzum, which is simply a revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Gevura is always going to be the secret of the emergence of Mashiach Tzidkenu. And that's why there's this man of din. It's a re-entry from the 6 millennia of Chesed, Gvur, Tferes, Netzach, Hod, and Yesoid, not back down to Malchus, but back up to Bina, which is the place where Gevuras come from. So ultimately, Sanhedrin and the din and the judgment that is being applied to the world is the opportunity for us to reveal Mashiach Tzidkenu. And the secret of the chelik of Mashiach Tzidkenu is the revelation of the part of Mashiach within me, as all of the tzaddikim say, that we all have a chelik of Mashiach, and that's the room of the Vitebsker in our mind. And it's specifically over here in Perek Chelik where we come to understand the secret of the partial elements of redemption in the secret of Sanhedrin, because Sanhedrin and judgment is Hashiva Shavtenu Kevari Shonavi Atzenu Kevaschila Vahasim Mimenu Yagon Va'anacha. That theoretically it's hard to understand the connection between the bracha of asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to return justice back to its rightful place, to restore the processes of judgment into their right and righteous way, with the notion of removing from ourselves sadness and impoverishment of spirit. But ultimately, when one contemplates the nature of judgment as self-judgment, as Rav Wolbe points out and as Rabbi Nachman points out in Reish Pei Beis, then it begins to make a lot of sense that so much of the sadness and the struggle that we come from is from the misjudgment of ourselves and judging ourselves unfavorably and holding ourselves down because all we have is the chelik. And it's specifically there when we learn to Hashiva Shavtenu Kevar Rishona, to allow myself to judge myself as I did at the beginning, with the innocence of the process and the righteousness of my spirit and the knowledge of where I come from, just as I judge myself in that place where it's the katan and it's the seir, back in that place of the moichin rishonim, of that original love. Specifically through that I'm going to undo the sadness and the despondency. And that nekuda is the nekuda of geula. The movement away from sadness and despondency is geula itself. That moments of simcha bring about redemption itself. Simcha is b'machshava, is the or of Mashiach Tzidkenu. That's the or tzadikim ki yismach. It's the light, the or hagonus, that the Baal Shem Tov was megala, and the Rabbi Nachman is megala, and the Gra is megala, and the Rashash is megala, and the Ramchal is megala, and the Rebbe is megala, and all of the Torah of our generation is megala. It's ultimately that secret of this tiny place, kevari shona, that I can let go a little bit of the heaviness and find joy. And that's why Parak Chelek is in Sanhedrin l'chayra, because when we uncover the secret of the Chelek and judge ourselves positively in judgment as the orientation of Sanhedrin, that's where a person is going to find the secret of Mashiach, which is all of the Gemaras of Mashiach, which are found in Parak Chelek. So now we're looking at Daf Tzadi Ches in Parak Chelek within Sanhedrin. So everything we just said now comes into more relief when we look at the Daf, which is Tzach. Tzach represents the clarification of things, the original sources of things, as the Arizal describes in the secret of the Tzach Tzachos. The Tzach Tzachos is the yearning that gives birth to satisfaction, and satisfaction that gives birth to yearning. The secret of understanding the Chelek Eloi Kamimal, and understanding that where we are, we can find our Chelek in Geula, even if we have not reached the general Geula, is ultimately rooted in the recognition that it's a tzach tzachos, that I'm always thirsty for more redemption, and that im kol zeh achak elo, every recognition of zeh keli vamveu, every moment of geula leads me to want more and more geula. And so it's the promise that we give ourselves to never be fully satisfied with finding those moments of geula within the self, and never chas v'shalom thinking that that's the actual geula, but always tasting the moments of geula to whet our appetite more and more, to desire Mashiach mamish even more and more, tekefu miyad mamish. And so on Daf Tzadi Ches, we see that Chazal discussed this pasuk of Be'ita Achishana. And Be'ita Achishena is a stira. The Meforshim all pointed out, why is Be'ita Achishena a stira? Because when it's talking about the emergence of Mashiach Tzidkenu, the notion of Be'ita means that there's an allotted time for Mashiach to come. There's a time that's set, there's a calendaric date that's set in time, and that's when Mashiach is going to come, in its allotted time. But then Achishena seems to be the implication of the opposite of a fixed time, because Achishena means hastening it. Achishena means bringing something earlier than its allotted time. And the ability to bring something earlier than its allotted time implies that the allotted time is not an allotted time, but rather it's a movable time and it's a fluid time. So on the one hand, the emergence of Mashiach Tzidkenu seems to be a very fixed point in time. And on the other hand, we see that it's the opposite of a fixed point in time, but it's a contingency. It's the ability to bring that point in time up, which reveals that the set date for it is not essential to the emergence of Mashiach Tzidkenu. And the pasuk seems to represent two separate concepts of how Mashiach or redemption would arrive. One is that it will come when it comes, no matter what a person does, and until it comes, it has not yet come, and until it arrives, it has not yet arrived. Or the element of Achishana says that no, the human being has the ability of drawing it closer in spite of the fact that it hasn't emerged into its allotted time. So when Chazal look at this pasuk and see the split nature of Mashiach, so what they understand is that Be'ita Achishana, in its time I will hasten it, Zachu Achishana, Loi Zachu Be'ita. If the Jewish people, if Klal Yisrael are meritorious, then it will be in the element of Achishana. Then the allotted time will be hastened, and we will bring it closer to our framework rather than having to wait the full process. But if we're not Zocha, if as a result of human experience and the historical sway in which human experience unfolds is unmeritorious of the emergence of Mashiach Tzidkenu prior to its time, then it will be in its fixed time. Then it will be in its fixed time. Now, before we go into the elements of where the Gra really brings this down into a neshama orientation, let's first look at the fact that these are soidos naraim that we have no access to other than the words that are written down by the tzaddikim in our generation who have the capacity to be the shluchim of the previous generation. And in particular, when you learn the Rebbe's ma'amarim and the hakdamos to the Yamei Chachma, and the hakdamas ha'machaber is typically where the razin and the secrets of Geul are hidden, where the Rebbe talks so much about the Be'ita and the Achishena, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, Cain and Hevel, Netzach and Hoid, Yishmael and Edom, and all of the frightening processes of each and every year in the Elef Hashishi, and its corresponds to the secret of the 6 days of creation, which is what the Grosbier and Safed News is ultimately all about, the place where the light of Mashiach Tzidkenu is hidden. And shown onto that scale of the historic emergence of Mashiach Tzidkenu, the concept of Be'ita Achishena, or of hastening it in its time, or in its time hastening it, is one of the sugyos that stands at the heaviest points of reality, in the sense that it goes all the way back to the secret of Cain and Hevel, and the reality that there was a separation between the neshama of Mashiach, which splits into Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef, and which splits into Yesod and Malchus of process and goal. And as a result of that original split, which was a homicide, which was a destruction, which was Cain's inability to live with the light of Hevel, because there was a separation now, and Cain had a kinna that emerged and it had to destroy Hevel, and all that was taking place there is fundamentally rooted in the unfolding process of each and every person throughout each and every expression in the grand unfolding of history on a collective and a personal level, as the Sharal Gugulim says, that we're all Cain and Hevel, and we all have parts of Cain and Hevel within us. But ultimately, when charted onto the mystery of history, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself, so the notion of Be'ita means that Mashiach Tzidkenu will come when the birurim and the tikkunim and the rectifications that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to carry out throughout the process of history are completed. Meaning to say that there's certain things, there's certain birurim, there's certain processes that need to take place in order for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring about Mashiach, which is the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning of the stage of history, which is the movement upwards to the Elef HaShvi'i, and then up to the Elef HaShmini, Tshi, Asiri. And so there's something that needs to happen. And because Klal Yisrael represents the central role in the unfolding process of all things, the purpose behind creation, the process through which creation emerges, and the tachlis at the end of creation. So Mamela, this process, those rectifications and fixings and processes that need to take place in the world very often are effective to Klal Yisrael itself, to the experience of Klal Yisrael and all of its myriad expressions in the grand unified body of Klal Yisrael, from Adam, David to Mashiach, and all of the valences of what it means for a person to be associated with Yiddishkeit on any level whatsoever. The processes, the rectifications, the birurim, the yisurim, all of the things that need to be refined in order so that Mashiach can finally arrive. In reality, there is a quota that needs to be met. There are things that need to be done. And when those things are done, it's be'ita. It's be'ita. Mashiach arrives. But the problem with that is that it's a very long time. If we wait that long for all of the rectifications to take place, who knows how long the wait is going to be? Ultimately, we know where the end of the wait will be, and even that we don't know. We don't know anything. We don't know anything. It's hidden within the Sela. It's hidden within the depths of the Tahoim, where we can't understand, even begin to understand what we don't understand about the Razin of Geula, as the Vilna Gaon points out over and over in Safra Ditzniusan and the Tikkunei Zohar v'chulei. But nevertheless, that Zman of Be'ita is a long time. And on the one hand, if we allow time to take care of all of the rectifications that need to be taken care of, so then hopefully those rectifications will be minimal. There'll be minimal rectifications, because it'll be, like the Gra points out, the Mashal and the Leshem brings us down as well, that there's a king who needs to punish his son with death by stoning. And ultimately, the king is stuck in a quandary of, I want to carry out the law, but at the same time, I want to express my undying love for my child. So how can I be Makayim them together? So what the Gra points out is that the Chacham informed the king that nobody said you have to throw the boulder at once. So break the boulder into a million little pieces, chisel it down into bite-sized manageable pieces, and throw those pebbles ever so slightly at the sun. It will take a much longer time, but it won't be painful. And so the notion of Be'ita is that there is a process that needs to take place, and those rectifications take time in order to take place. As the Arizal uses the Lashonos of the Kav coming back down into the Halal is la'at la'at. It comes slowly but surely. And as the Arizal uses the Lashon to describe the birur of the Nitzotzos from below to above, he uses the Lashon of ma'at ma'at, little by little. And so the unfolding process in its gentle form is little by little. So Be'ita is calmness. It's not going to hurt necessarily, but it's going to be a very, very, very long time. That's the nature of Be'ita. So the benefit of Be'ita is that it will not be difficult. And the difficulty of Be'ita is that it will take a very long time. Achishena, on the other hand, is the inverse principle. Achishena is the recognition that I can't wait anymore. I don't want to wait. It's impossible to wait. The tsar of Gullus is too strong. The difficulty of Gullus is too strong. And therefore, I want Achishena. I want it now. I want to bring it about before it's time. So I understand. There's a process of we want to speed up the process and we want to bring about redemption immediately. But what about all of the rectifications and the tikkunim that need to take place? What about all of the processes and those tikkunim that take so much time that the Be'ita process, the emergence of Mashiach in its right time, will represent? And so what Achishena offers is the ability to bring about the time of Mashiach before its time, but the tikkunim are going to be more severe, and there's going to need to be a quicker way in which those birurim and those processes of rectification take place, and the more intense they're going to be, the more likely it is that they're going to affect Klal Yisrael, and the more dangerous they are for Klal Yisrael, and the more painful they are for Klal Yisrael, v'chulei v'chulei. And so on the level of reading the Osios, the Be'ita, the emergence of Mashiach in his time, has the benefit of not being difficult, because it's throwing pebbles in order so that it won't be hard, but it's going to take a very long time for Mashiach to arrive. On the other hand, the benefit of the Achishena is that it's going to be quicker. We won't have to wait so long, but the difficult property of Achishena is going to be the reality that the process and the birurim are going to need to be more severe. They're going to need to be more sped up. So the secret, what the Rebbe points out, based on the tzaddik and based on the Gra, when it comes to the Torah of Mashiach Mamish, and it comes to that experience of what's going to happen where the tzaddikim are payal all of these things, and we just get to read the words that they scribble for us in the miyut, and the smallest element of what might actually be going on in terms of our graspability. The secret is that there's a way of Be'ita Achishena. Be'ita Achishena, to read these two things, to read these two stages as not either or, not as one or the other, but rather as two parts of a singular process. And once we explain this Nakuda, then we'll see how that applies to the historic realm of Mashiach, and then we'll apply it all to the inner experience of emerging into the room of the V'tesker in our mind, which is Karva El Nafshi Giyala. Now, when we read the pasuk Be'ita Achishena, Ani Hashem Be'ita Achishena, when you read it on a Pashat Pshat, there's not really a distinction between those two temporal frameworks. It doesn't mean Be'ita, pause, and then or Achishena, that it will either be in its time or it will be hastened, but rather Be'ita Achishena. The implication is meaning that Hashem, I am Hashem, Be'ita, in its allotted time, I will hasten it, meaning that it should be read in one fell swoop. And this diuk is already expressed by the Gra in the name of the Gra in the Sefer Kol Hatur. Be'ita Achishena. Be'ita Achishena, B'kesher l'divrei Chazal, in connection to the words of Chazal. This is on page, this is I forget which edition of the Kol Hatur this is, but this is in Ois Ches. Be'ita Achishena, B'kesher l'divrei Chazal, connection to the words of Chazal, ala pasuk Be'ita Achishena, in its time I will hasten it. Chazal tell us on Tzadi Ches and Sanhedrin, Zachu Achishana, if you're meritorious and you deserve it, Achishana, Loi Zachu Be'ita. Amar Lanu Rabbeinu. What the Vilna Gaon told to us is soif, in the end of the day, ein mikra yoitzim ibdei pshuto. In the end of the day, we cannot read the pasuk in any other way other than the pasuk of pshat, and this is what we touched upon, what we see from the Graz Talmud Mufak, Rav Menachem and the Lishklov, Schus Yagan Aleinu, in the Saktama to the Bir Hagra on Mishlei, which is that it is impossible for a person to understand the soid of a pasuk without understanding the pshat, and it's impossible for a person to understand the pshat of a pasuk without understanding the sod. Why? Because the pshat is the sod, and the sod is the pshat. And ultimately, what the Graz is saying here is that we are forced to look back at the pasuk pshat reading of this pasuk, which is that Be'ita Achish are a simultaneous kind of immediate process. That the basic understanding of this pasuk is that even in its allotted time, there will still be an element of drawing it closer to before its allotted time. That within the time allotment of the arrival of Mashiach, there will also be the paradoxical movement of bringing Mashiach even before its time. Umatai, and when is that going to be, says the Gra? It's going to be the first two clauses of the pasuk, when the young and the small one will be transformed into 1,000, and the youth or the young will be transformed into a tremendous nation. Now, before we go weiter in the Gra, what the Rebbe describes in his Maimer, I believe it's from Tafshin Samach Zayin and Yama Chochma, it's Kedusha Mishulesesh, discussing the distinction between the light of Shabbos, the light of Rosh Chodesh, and the light of Yontif, is that the light of Be'ita Achishana is the radical secret that HaKadosh Baruch Hu offers us to bring about redemption by way of Rachamim Rabbim, by way of L'ma'eni Asa, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings Geula for absolutely nothing that we do. But at the same point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be participatory players in the process of the emergence of Geula. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu Beracham of Harabim has the capacity to bring about the redemption of Metzius by way of Be'ita, meaning to say that it is going to be the benefit of Be'ita, which will be that the pebbles are going to be thrown. It's going to be slow and steady processes of difficulty. And difficulty is always relative, and it's always a mixed bag. Whenever we look at the grand process of history, it's always moments of Be'ita and moments of Achishana. But the secret of Be'ita Achishana on the historical plane is that there can be an emergence of Mashiach by way of Be'ita, which means that it's going to be the least painful process imaginable, meaning the rectifications that are expressed by way of time taking time. But at the same point, it will be Ba'achishana, at the same point, it will be immediate, it will be hastened. Meaning to say that in spite of the fact that there's still who knows what is left to be done, who knows what birurim are left, and even if the Lubavitch Rebbe says that nothing is left to be done other than the opening of the door for Mashiach Tzidkenu to arrive, who knows the infinite stages that are inherent within the opening of the door for Mashiach Tzidkenu to arrive. And so we don't know what that process will look like. And so the tefillah of Be'ita Achishena on a global scale is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring about the rectifications of Geula by way of Be'ita, which is the minimalization of the difficulty, the minimalization of the struggle, which comes about through the Be'ita model of allowing time to take its time. But at the very same time, it should come about with the Achishena benefit, which is that it should come immediately. It should come quick without having to wait, and it should erase the negatives of both Stadim and highlight the benefits of both Stadim, which is always the tool in Kedusha. When we have this paradoxical relationship between A and B, ultimately what we're going to come to is a middle point that has the benefits of A and the benefits of B, with a quieting down of the negation of A and the negation of B, that it's the best of both options that unified together to give birth to a better option that was available in the beginning. And so the Be'ita Achishena is the taking the good of both situations. The good of the Be'ita of in its time is that the difficulty and the struggle and the birurim will be very gentle, and it will not be intense because it will have taken place over a long extended period of time. But it's also going to have the benefit of the Achishena that it's not going to have to actually take place over a long process of time. And we get rid of the negatives. The negatives of the Be'ita is that we have to wait long, and the negative, the Achishena, is that it has to be very intense in its struggle. And so the secret of Be'ita Achishena, what the Vilna Gaon is pointing out, that it will be hastened in its time, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring that about immediately. Take it from Miyad Mamish, that should be the Kiyum, and that should be the Tefillah, and that should be the Hisayrus of Geula, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should reveal himself, Lama'eni Ya'asa, and the secret of Be'ita Achishena, which is the Rosh Tevos of Bo, which is the Boy El Paro, where Moshe Rabbeinu was Dachil Minei. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to enter in to the belly of the snake, to the house of Paro, because he was afraid that the serpent there, the Shirish of Ra, the Shirish of difficulty, the Shirish of Gullus in Metzias was too overpowering for him, and he saw the Tanin HaGadol, and he was terrified. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Boy El Paro, come forth to Paro. Boy El Paro, says the Zohar HaKadosh, come forth to Paro, as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was speaking to Moshe from the house of Paro itself. Leicha Paro mipaile. It should have said, go to Paro. Go to Paro, not come to Paro, go to Paro. Elamah, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was found in the house of Paro itself, and that secret, that impossible paradox of this unity of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to bring about for us is Be'ita Achishen as Rosh Tevos Bo. And now the element is to try and apply this on one level or another to human experience. Now, just as we said that there's an element of Mashiach Tzidkenu, which is Be'ita, which means that it arrives in its proper time. And there's an element of Mashiach Tzidkenu, which is the secret of Achishena, of hastening it. Now, Rav Tzadok HaKohen Melablin, in Tzidkas HaTzadik, and he brings this down in numerous places throughout Pri Tzadik in different ways. But in the 50th teaching of Tzidkas HaTzadik, Rav Tzadok HaKohen Melablin says as follows: Al kol mine yeshuos shel Hashem yisparach la'adam, in any manner of salvation or redemption that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings for a person, yesh be'ita va'achishena. There's a notion of be'ita in its allotted time, and achishena in its hastened time. And the understanding of Chazal, Zachu Achishena, if they're meritorious, it will bring itself immediately. Lo Zachu Be'ita, if they're not meritorious, it will take time. Be'ita, what does it mean, Be'ita, says Rav Tzadok HaKohen Melablin? What does it mean, this allotted time, where it's not a question of whether Mashiach Tzidkenu will arrive, it's not a question of whether the redemption of self will come, it's not a question of whether we'll win. We always win. Everything is always moving upwards. But the question of Be'ita is the recognition that in the end of the day, it's against the person's will that they'll come to identify the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that might be by all different types of twisted and turning ways. And that secret of Be'ita, that inevitability of Hashem revealing himself. This happens. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends redemption to a person. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends salvation to a person when at this point they can no longer live without that thing. They feel a deficiency within themselves and they're yearning for it. The element of Be'ita, says Rav Tzadok HaKohen Melablin, is when I can't live without this thing anymore. I've come to the limit. I can't handle it anymore without this thing. And therefore, reality, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is forced to reveal that thing from me because I can't do it anymore. When I come to that place in myself, or ich kenish sein, I can't survive anymore without this redemption. I can't survive anymore without the movement away from this problem. It's at that point that's the allotted time. The allotted time is when I can't do it anymore. Where it's powerlessness. It's the edge of the edge. I'm forced into the corner. And all I can do is scream out for the Rabbeinu Shloim at that point. And this is also true when it comes to the Viyas HaMashiach Mamish, which we were just discussing. That what is the Be'ita element? The Be'ita element, what does it mean in its time? Hakol tzmeim lishuaso. At that point, everybody is going to be dying of thirst. Like Daf Tzadiches, those tzachtzachos, dying of thirst for his salvation. V'lo yashum eitza acheres. And there's no other suggestion, no other option, liyeshuas Yisrael, nothing else to rely on, and that's available to a person each and every moment when they realize that everything is just an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's koyach, and nothing is koyach without HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the Vias Mashiach in the Zman of Be'ita is when everybody comes to a place of realizing that there's nothing else to root on, move on the maskil, and it's clear to those who understand. All of these different elements of Mashiach coming at that last moment, at the very brink. I've entered into the brink already, and now the game has to be called by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the element of Achishena, the element of hastening it, the secret of drawing the light of redemption closer, away from its allotted time, is the secret of calling out for HaKadosh Baruch Hu prior to the problem, prior to the struggle, becoming something that is an emergency. of the forward thinking and the consequential thinking and the ability to look forward from beyond the present moment and to delay gratification in the light of the future circumstance is the secret of drawing redemption into the present moment in spite of the fact that the allotted time has not arrived yet. Achishena, hainu terem yikru, even before that hopeless call for redemption comes out. Shemaktim refu lamaka. It's the revelation of the cure prior to the emergence of the sickness, healing the sickness prior to the sickness even emerging, or nipping it in its bud. And Rav Tzadok says as follows. Rav Tzadok continues, and he says, Al kol panim, shaloi zachal achishena. Many times, the person is not going to be meritorious of achishena, of hastening the light of Mashiach in their lives, hastening that redemption, of learning how to find the need for redemption even prior to the externalities of reality forcing me into surrendering in the moment of winning, recognizing even when I'm winning that I'm muvatul b'tachlis HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not only when I'm at the brink, not only when I find myself crying out from the void, but even when I find myself at the top. To recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I need your refuah here, that's to be makdim the geula even prior to the emergence of the pain, of the difficulty. Not everybody is zoicha to that forward thinking. But nevertheless, in the end of the day, be'ita, when it comes to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will emerge, will reveal that redemption in our life when we're hopeless, when we're at that point of true powerlessness, and we cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the impoverishment of spirit, from that place of David Malka Mashiach within us. Every neshama in Klal Yisrael will be zoicha to this. Af haloi zacha, even those who are not meritorious of the other form. Meaning there's an inevitability of the recognition that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be present to a Yid when we cry out from absolute surrender with nothing else to rest ourselves on other than the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That, in the end of the day, is inevitable. That light, that spark that exists, that redemption that exists at the end of the problem, after all of the stages of the problem unfold, when all is said and done, there will be a nakuda of tzipiyah Yeshua, because Ein Shem Yesh Ba'ilam Klal. That's the light of Be'ita, where it's clear that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will reveal himself because there's no other option. The light of Achishena is the capacity of drawing down the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu even prior to the problem, because I understand that to be human is to be susceptible to a problem. And all I have is to recognize within whatever powers I feel I have, to recognize my true powerlessness, to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu kidal va'ani ani, I have nothing. Like the secret of the Rishner, who, yeah, I'll wear golden shoes, but there's no soles on them. The status of being in Be'ita is I have no shoes to wear. There's no shoes to wear. I'm barefoot. There's no golden shoes. I'm a pauper. I have nothing else, Rabbeinu Shalom. Send your redemption. I'm impoverished. I'll die without it. And at that moment, Hashem will always send the Yeshua. Will always send the Yeshua in one way or another, the beginning of the Yeshua. But the secret of finding the Yeshua, even when I'm sitting in a palace, of wearing those golden shoes, of having all of that schus, and still recognizing prior to the breakdown that Rabbeinu Shalom, I need you every second. I need you every second here. Checking in with the Rabbeinu Shalom. Seeing the Havaya to the left of me, to the right of me, to the center. Reminding myself, Shavisi Hashem l'negdi tamid, Shavisi Hashem l'negdi tamid. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the moment I deviate my mind away from you, it could be nechshav as the biggest sin in the world. Let that be the struggle. Let the struggle be a momentary distancing of myself from your true presence. And at that moment of Achishena, I could be mamtik the process even before it begins. I could bring a redemption even before it begins. But not everybody is zoicha to that light of Achishena. But everybody is going to be zoicha to the light. Kol nefesh Yisrael, af haloi zacha, will be meritorious of be'ita. Shebe'ita, that in its allotted time, mazmin lo Hashem yisbarach Yeshua. Hashem will send the Yeshua. We see that that's not true. We see that there are many people who express hopelessness. We see many people at the bottom of the line who are not finding that be'ita, redemption. The door of the Vitebsker's office is not opening into the room, even in the pockets of hopelessness. So Dr. Tzadok, imira she'ein mazmin lo, if a person sees that the Yeshua is still not coming, it's a clear revelation that the thing that I'm so desirous of, Rabbeinu Shalom, I can still live without. If I were to truly come to a place of realizing that I can't live without this thing, that I can't live without this or that I can't live without this light of Mashiach in my life, it would appear immediately. Elama, it's clear that there's ultimately an element of ourselves that's still holding on to power, that's still holding on to the element of placing our trust in some other element, and therefore we remain in the unfolding process of Be'ita, that it hasn't yet arrived. But what Rav Tzadok HaKohen Meilabun is expressing here, in my mind, is something very delicate and very profound, and we'll try and humbly bring it out a little bit. That the inyan of Vias HaMashiach in our minds, and reflected so too in the Vias HaMashiach B'Klalius HaKol, is ultimately a process of how is the redemption going to arrive? What is going to be the opening in which I allow that light of okayness to descend down into my life? Where will I find that menucha? And there's a menucha that will come about because life is so chaotic and I've lost myself and I'm struggling and I've lost my mind over and over and I see disparity and I see disunity and all of my power and all of my strength and all of the things that I thought I could trust in and all of the binyanim hamifuarim, the beautiful buildings of control and power that I've cultivated for myself, all of them have fallen down. Abba ve'imi azavuni v'Hashem yaspeini. And in that place I cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu mimamakim krasicha Hashem. But what I have done is I've lingered in the mindset so long of not needing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help. The light of Mashiach Tzidkenu is needing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help. The light of Geula is bittul. The light of Geula is the recognition of Ki ayin ba'ayin yir b'shuv Hashem Sion, that I need you, Rebbeinu Shalom, to look me eye in the eye. It's not enough for being in the room. It's not enough for me to trust that you love me, Rebbeinu Shalom. I need to see eye to eye that you love me. And at that place, HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals Ki ayin ba'ayin yir b'shuv Hashem Sion, that each person will come to realize that Rebbeinu Shalom, you created all of this just for me. That's the light of powerlessness that comes about with Mashiach. The Mashiach Tzidkenu is the powerlessness that gives birth to power. It's the recognition of a bittul muchletes that now allows us to survive even that bittul and to emerge with the strength that we've always had, which was the strength of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the bittul, the recognition of powerlessness, is the emergence of Mashiach Tzidkenu into our lives. That's what it means when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to reveal Mashiach, specifically when we're misyayesh min haparanios. At that brink point where I say, Rebbeinu Shalom, my God, my man-made power has been lost, therefore reveal to me your power, and in that moment there's Geula. That's the secret of Be'ita, where I try with Yeshus, I try with ego, I try and figure it out, I try and impose, I try and fix, I try and do, I do. And in the end of the day, I come to realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, only you are the Makah B'Patish, only you are the Lakel Goymer Alai. That Hashlech Yahavcha Lashem V'hu Yichak Alecha. V'yinoim Hashem, Masi Yadeinu Kainaneu, as the Rebbe has been talking about in the name of the Ishbitzer, that I can't even finish a mitzvah, Rebbeinu Shalom. You finish the mitzvah for me. Take the work of my hand and you complete it. Take the work of my hand and you attach the kavanah to it. That light of bittul muchletes is the light of vias goyel tzedek. That's the light of Mashiach Tzidkenu that comes to reveal how HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been carrying us at every moment. And there's a way of coming to that bittul muchletes and that place of impoverishment of spirit that is coming from a place of strength, from that place of the whisper that knows so deeply its enrootedness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that secret of the inevitability of the be'ita, of the emergence of redemption in its time. And then Hashem reveals himself in that place of bittul. The secret of Achishana, the secret of hastening it in its time, the secret of hastening it in its time is the secret of tasting that bittul all along. Tasting that bittul, tasting that recognition of I have nothing but you, Rebbeinu Shalom. I have no power other than the power given by you. I have nothing other than what you express through me. I have no words other than the words you give me. I have no thoughts other than the thoughts you give me. I have no strength in my muscles and my body other than the strength that you give me. I have no worries other than the ones you give me. I have no joys other than the ones you give me. I have no shef. I have no parnas. I have no chayus. I have no love. I have nothing other than what you give me, Rebbeinu Shalom. No kel goymer alai bittul muchletes. At that point, the person is nishapich themselves into a kli that's male bracha, a kli that can be machzik bracha, because there's bittul. And that's the place where the Or of Atzilus and the Or of HaKadosh Baruch Hu could be niskala. And the secret of Achishena is recognizing the powerlessness, recognizing our dependency upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even prior to being forced by reality to recognize our powerlessness. By acknowledging our powerlessness from the get-go, Moida ani, I'm hoid shabahoid, I am powerless within powerlessness. Powerlessness within powerlessness. I have nothing, Rebbeinu Shalom. Hoid shabahoid, unconscious of unconscious, sickness of sickness. The lowest of the lowest, that place where the impoverishment of spirit begins, that place that is orphaned from the light of Bina, that edge where Bina can express itself at the end of things where it appears to be devoid, that hoid shabahoid, that bittul, that moidim derabana, not only moidim, that I'm saying, oh wow, Hashem, everything you did for me was so nice, but moidim derabana, and everything that you're going to do for me is so nice. Moidim itself is be'ita. The redemption of Moedim, the redemption of the Sha'ashui Olam Haba, which Rabbi Nachman says is Haida'ah and gratitude, Moedim itself is Be'ita. Hashem, you have done so much for me. It took me time to recognize it. At the end of the day, I'm now coming to look back on everything you've done for me, and now I'm saying, Rebbeinu Shalom, you were here in my life. And I'm mavata myself at the end of all of the processes that took place, and that's the Be'ita. That's where it took me time to recognize my impoverishment and my dependency on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but now I'm bending myself and acknowledging. Moedim derabanan, which is the light of Lag BaOmer, which is Hoid Shebahoid, because Hoid is Moedim and Hoid Shebahoid is Moedim derabanan, as the tzaddikim point out. In that place, what I'm recognizing is that even all of the things that are about to come through my own power, theoretically, I'm also thanking you because I know now that it's all through you. It's only you. The koyach comes from you. The koyach to be makir that the koyach comes from you comes from you. And that moedim derabanan is the assurance of the spirit and the via sagoyel right here, right now. And that's the moment of redemption. Bittul, hoida'a, recognition that Hashem, you are driving the boat. You are the boat, you're the water, you're driving the boat, you're the captain, you're the ropes, you're all of it. You're all of it. And my consciousness, my reflection, my hegyonibi is just experiencing this unfolding process as a shliach of you to fix this tiny nitzotz of this particular neshama and this particular name in this particular moment. But everything is through the lens of bittul. That's the secret of Achishana. And in that place of Achishana, in that place of the emergence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, immediately, where I let go and let God immediately, where I let go and I relinquish control even before I'm forced to relinquish control, it's not the negation of trying to fix. It's not the negation of trying to engage. Adarabba, it's what gives me permission to engage. Rabbeinu Shloim, I start the day off and I say, I have no power whatsoever. I'm an actor today. I'm a shliach today. I know I only have a wooden sword. Now I'm going to be poel. Now I'm going to be poel. I know everything is you. And now I'm going to have to enter into the world of Bechira. This is the light of Ishbitz. Only through the Yediyah Berura that Einoin Milvado and that all that exists is HaKadosh Baruch Hu and that Bechira is not a real thing. Only then does Bechira actually become something that is real serious, because Avad Hashem is in control of everything. And so trying to pretend that Bechira actually exists in some way outside of the realm of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity is a silly thing, as the Rambam and the Ravid describe. The Rambam speaks about it without giving an answer, and the Ravid says, okay, you shouldn't give an answer when you don't have an answer. You should be silent. And like we spoke about in the Zohar Shir previously, the balance between speech and silence is the birth of a whisper. So the Rambam and the Ravid and the question of Yediyah and Bechira are ultimately dancing with each other in the secret of Chash and Mal, the silence of the Ravid, saying, don't say what you can't fully say, and the Rambam saying, no, I have to say what I want to say, even though I can't fully say it. And the unity between the two of those reveal the secret of Yediyah and Bechira. But it's only when I recognize that Bechira is a vada, absolutely within the realm of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Be'ita Mashiach is a vada going to come, it's going to emerge. It's then that Bechira begins to be fundamentally important. It's there that I begin to take my role seriously because I'm an actor. And so this recognition of powerlessness at the outset of the day is not the negation of action, but rather it's the thing that allows action to take place with a flimsy grip on that sword, because I recognize that I just have to pretend that I think that I'm in control, even though Hashem knows and I know that He's really only in control, and Hashem knows that I know it also, yet I'm still forced to engage in this process, and it becomes a schoik and it becomes a sha'ashua. And saying Moida Ani and Moedim Derabanan is the preparation for the day. And it empowers me to go through my day and to try and rectify everything and to fix everything. So the acknowledgement of powerlessness that allows the light of Mashiach Tzidkenu into my mind, that hoid shebahoid, that comes about with that secret of needing the redemption even before the need for redemption, of needing the refuah even before the makkah, because I'm able to discern the shirish of the makkah prior to its emergence. That's the secret of tasting redemption right here, right now. That's the secret of being so desperate for the light of redemption. Even though I don't feel desperate, I know that I need to figure out that place in my mind where I am desperate, and in that place Mashiach Tzidkenu arrives. That's the room of the Vitebsker in Tiberia, that place of Safek Tumas Misa that Rashbi walks out to, that place of the edge, that place looking over the Kinneret Misafon Tiftachara. And it's at that very edge that there's a revelation of that secret of the room of the Vitebsker, which is going to be that secret place of Achishena. When I realize my helplessness at the very outset, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends Mashiach in that moment. And in terms of the temporal framing of it, in terms of the experience of it, now here it becomes even more delicate, because on the one hand, we live in the durational lag of time. Ever since Chet of Eitz Hadas, time is born. Lo Yisboshishu means that there was no time awareness, there was no fear of duration, of separation between process and goal, of redemption and exile. And everything was as near to immediate as it could be. Lo Yisboshishu. But as the Netziv points out, as we've spoken about so often, that boishesh Moshe Levo is a sense of lateness, afterwardness, a sense of being late. I'm late for a very important date. And that's where the chase of time begins, and all of the anxiety and the existential reality of time, which is the opposite of redemption. Mashiach is beyond time. Time is worry. Time is constriction. Time is power. Time is I'm in control. I have to manage my time. I have to be on time. I'm the one in control. Time is the zimun. I am called to be the one who announces things. I am called to be the one in control. Mashiach is the light of Ani Hayom Yilad Sicha. It's the light of that which is above time. That which is above time. And so the emergence from beyond time into time is the emergence from that place of calmness of spirit, which comes about with the relinquishment of strength and the acknowledgement that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs everything. And it's falling into the treacherous territories of power. Power and time and rushing, it's what gives birth to the anxiety of the self. And so Be'ita means that there's a goal that's going to happen. There's a goal that's going to happen. And if that goal doesn't happen yet, it's going to happen. There's no way that it's not going to happen. And a person can live with that mindset that there's no way that it's not going to happen and eventually wait until it happens. Wait until it happens. And then what we lose out on is the ability to jump. We lose out on the ability to bridge that minimal gap and that lapse of time. There has to be some element of time. There has to be some element of a feeling of a distinction between Galus and Geula. And so the secret of Be'ita Achishena is that in its time, even though it's very, very late and it's just about to happen, I will still have the schus of being boicher in it and tasting it before it arrived. Generally, we can look at the Achishena as, okay, I choose to live HaKadosh Baruch Hu's experience right now because I'm not forced to do it. And then there are those who are going to live the experience of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the sense that you didn't taste it beforehand because you only experienced when it arose. The secret of Be'ita Achishena is that right before Hashem is about to reveal himself, there's always an opportunity to pause and be boicher, to reveal Mashiach Tzidkenu even before he arrives, to choose to draw Mashiach down, even though we know it's about to happen. Even we know there's the inevitability that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to reveal himself. There's still that moment of chizuk hadas, of pulling the self back even prior to the end of something and revealing Mashiach even before it comes, revealing the redemption of the moment even before it arrives. That secret is the secret of the first siman in Shulchan Aruch, that Yehu Yiskaber Ka'ari la'avoid ba'boiker, that you should strengthen yourself and get up like a lion to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the morning. Kihu Yoyer HaShachar, that a person themselves, like David Malka Mashiach, is the one who wakes up the morning. What does it mean to wake up the morning? The morning is going to arrive and it's going to wake a person up. But there's a secret of waking the morning up, which is getting up a little bit before the morning and becoming those who cry out for Geula even before the emergence of Geula itself. This is the secret of finding redemption even prior to the redemption itself. Of understanding even at the depths of darkness, right before the dawn breaks, that I have the capacity of affirming the dawn even prior to its arrival. Even though it's about to arrive, I still have the ability to bring it into a place of Achishena. I can still leap. I can still minimize that time. I can find that last second of Bechira Chavshis to strengthen myself and to throw myself down with ferocity into this moment itself and to draw HaKadosh Baruch Hu down right here, right now, and to minimize any time lapse that might be necessary prior to that arrival. And it's that secret of overcoming time where in the last moment I could jump and dig myself down deeper into the moment and say, even though the moment is about to end, nevertheless, I can still connect to the inner light of Mashiach Tzidkenu that rests right here, right now. A person will benefit from the fruit of their labor, and it will be as if they drew the light of Mashiach down into Olam Hazeh itself, of tasting it right before its arrival. That's the secret of the dilug, that I have to jump, even though I see the end is in sight. The end is in sight, the redemption is right there. I still have to make that leap and bring redemption even before that redemption arrives. I have to force redemption to arrive even a second earlier before it actually arrives, even a split second earlier than it actually arrives, in order so that I can be said to be one who has tasted the light of Be'ita Achishena, of demanding salvation even right before salvation emerges. Of feeling that despondency and that impoverishment of spirit that cannot live another second without the calmness of spirit. And in that place, the calmness emerges even prior to calmness emerging. And this is the secret of Mashiach Tzidkenu that Rabbi Nachman discusses. This is the secret of Mashiach Tzidkenu, is going to say, Ani hayom yilad asicha. Ani hayom yilad asicha. I was born today. How could it be that I was born today? Mashiach Tzidkenu has gone through so much difficulty, so much suffering, so much processes, so much being hidden in the chambers of Rome, so much being hidden in concealment, where ultimately he says that it's as if I was born today. But as Rabbi Nachman says in Torah Samach Aleph and Tinyana, that ultimately the secret of Mashiach is Lamalam and Azman. And Mashiach Tzidkenu moves so quickly with Zrizus, moving quickly, breaking through the barriers of time, so that at that last moment I can overcome that process. Mashiach is about to be arrived. Redemption is about to arrive, and we push ourselves ever so slightly to jump in and bring redemption even before it arrives. Through that act of gevura, that simsum of saying, no, I can't tolerate the concealment even 1 second more, even though the concealment is about to break, to be of those yoid bina leitim, B'nai Yissaschar, those who were capable of discerning the moments of redemption, prior to their emergence, one moment before, to smell it in the air, and be able to be intoxicated with that spirit of Mashiach even prior to the emergence of Mashiach. That's the light of Mashiach. Ani hayoim ladasicha. Today, all it demands is today, in this moment, let me overcome the prevention and the stuckness within the natural suffering of not being in the mindset of needing Mashiach, and let me relinquish my control right here, right now. And says Rabbi Nachman, after describing how the lower the mind, the longer the time, the higher the mind, the shorter the time, that with intensity of the mind, there's a crunching down of time, and it begins to be like a kvitza tza'aretz, that it's a seder hazmanim. I enter back into that place of l'malam hazman. Kigam b'chalom, when I'm not so active and my mind is not so active and it's inactive, but rather it's the imaginative principles. Im haya echad bo etzlo b'shas chalom. If a person came to me in the middle of my dream, v'haya oimer lo, and told me that all of the 80 years that I just experienced in my dreams, all of that time that I've gone through in my dream, in truth, there was no amount of time whatsoever. All it was 15 minutes. I wouldn't believe that person whatsoever. Because the more magushim a mind is and the more stuck in reality a mind is, the more time feels like it's this elongated process. So too mamish, says Rabbi Nachman, afal pisha etzleinu lefi sechlenu ninba shezeu zman shel shivim shana. Even though all of concealment and gullus appears to be 70 years, b'seichel agadol yoter rak revasha. Above in the mind, and a mindset that's just a little bit refined, all it is really 15 minutes. And even above, in a higher mind and a higher graspability. Even that mind which sees the entirety of exile as only 15 minutes in relationship to the 70 years we see it as, in the mind that's higher than that mind, or the element of the mind that's higher than that element of the mind, even that 15 minutes is not something that grasps any place. Because in a higher place, it's even less time. The higher a person is, the less and less time it is. This is the secret of the blind beggar, which is the secret of the seventh beggar who has not yet arrived, the legless beggar, which the Rebbe points out, which is that beggar who says, I'm so old that I don't remember anything whatsoever. I don't remember anything because I'm such a heilig neshama, the seichel is so high that there's no graspability of time. There's no duration whatsoever. It's right now. I bring Mashiach right now without duration, without that be'ita. I enter into that achishana. There's a mind, the mind of Mashiach, the light of Mashiach Tzidkenu that unfolds from within each and every one of us. That light of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is Boishish Moshe Lavo, and that tikkun of Hoisif Yom Echad Medaiso, that Moshe Rabbeinu was capable of grasping that one day Bedaiso. That Evad the Mashiach was about to come, it's one day next. But Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us the secret of Yomim Al Yemei Melech Toisif. Add on to the days of Melech HaMashiach. Bring about redemption even prior to redemption. Be medaleg on that ma'avar and force redemption to emerge even prior to its actual emergence. This is the secret of Be'ita Achishena, of feeling that necessity of Be'ita within Achishena. Shasham kol asman kulo in a nachshav klal. There's no time whatsoever there, or all of the time is not considered as anything. It's considered as naught. Kimach masgoidol aseichel ma'oid, because of the refinement of that mind. Kol zman ein ve'efes lagamrei. Everything is emptiness and nullity. Just like for us, the 70 years of existence in a dream is really only 15 minutes in reality. The seichel of Mashiach, there's a mind above a mind, shazman nesbata lagamrei, and Mashiach emerges immediately. Ve'al kein Mashiach, and this is the secret of Mashiach. That light of Mashiach, of Adam Davan Mashiach, of every element of Nishmas Yisrael and Klal Yisrael that are emergent from the beginning of creation through the process towards the end. We have gone through what we have gone through. And even after this, B'ni ata, you're my child. I have born you today. Today, it's impossible to understand. All of this is mamish through the das of Mashiach, which is, yes, you've gone through so much, but ultimately all it takes is one day, and because of the heilige nature of the Jewish mind, it can be transformed into one moment's decision where it's as if there's been no time whatsoever. Due to the high level that it will grasp, Sheyigdal ad ma'oid ma'oid, above the Yetzer, which is the ma'oid ma'oid, past the bridge, which is the Gesher Tsar ma'oid ma'oid, through the double nature of Shiflus, which is the ma'oid ma'oid have shofar ruach, in order to access that light of Eretz Yisrael, which is the secret of the haaretz toiv ma'oid ma'oid, toiv haaretz ma'oid ma'oid. To the degree that it's as if all of that time that he's gone through is ayin ve'efes mamish, and that's mamish ki'ilu no'el ladayom. Mamish ki'ilu, be'ita achishena. Be'ita achishena, ki yizbatel kol zman b'sechlo, because a person has undone all of that durational necessity of waiting till the be'ita, and we throw ourselves immediately into achishena. Yeh gadol ma'od. V'al ken yomer lam Hashem yisbarach, ani hayom milad asich. I can always be revealed right here, right now. Hayom mamish ki kol zman sha'avar ayin ve'efes lagamri. This is the secret of Yesh Zar's v'niskar v'yesh zar v'nisvad, as Rabbi Nachman describes in Ayin Tes and Tinyana, that for those who are tzaddikim, you can take time. Tzaddik is able to experience the durational lag between mitzvah and mitzvah in that empty space of waiting for Mashiach to arrive. But about tshuva, the person who has to run out of a place of concealment in order to draw redemption into their minds of karvel nafshi giyala, it's a secret of Yesh Zariz the Niskar, that by rushing, by jumping, by diving right into the Moichin of Moedim Derabanan of Bittul Behechlet, even before the beginning, even before the process forces me to acknowledge it, that's the way of bringing Mashiach Tzidkenu into our minds. That's the way of tasting the Or Haganas. That's the way of experiencing Oilamecha B'Chayecha. That's the secret of Zrizas B'Mesinas and Mesinas B'Zrizas. And Be'ezras Hashem will continue to go weiter into the sugyos of Mashiach Tzidkenu, internal and external, Be'ezras Hashem.